This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
It's the Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along as we pass over to you, the listeners. Coming up over the next half an hour, we'll be getting into your questions on transfer policy, tactics, and plenty more besides, including, is it time for a change in the big chair on Blood Red? Well, to provide the insight, we have our correspondent, Paul Gorst, the chief, Ian Doyle, and the Squires, fresh from his interview with Alberto Aquilani. Do go and check that out across Blood Red if you haven't done so already. Gents, are we all well? Gorsty, start with you.
Yeah, not bad. Fresh from, 9-10 days off. So, refreshed. And I think it's the first pod I've done for a couple of weeks now. So, happy to get stuck into the Q&A format of the international lull.
And you've only 9 days until you're off to Dublin, aren't you? Blood Red Live.
Yeah. Blood Red Live in Dublin. Me and Josh Williams are going out there on the day of the Porto game. So that's the 24th, is it? I think. Whenever it is. It's the Porto game anyway. And not too sure of what the setup's going to be, but we're going out there and the Dubliners are going to come out and probably grill us about transfers and tactics and whatever else. And should be a good night. But in Dublin. So yeah, looking forward to that one in a week or two, whenever it is. But should be good.
Yeah, happy days. We will put the link in the description, but you can win a chance for free ticket to that, as well as a chance to win a signed autograph from Trent Alexander-Arnold, all going out.
I thought you were going to say free autograph from Gorsty then.
No. Well, we can throw Gorsty's in as well. I'm sure Gorsty on the night is going to be busy signing plenty of merch for people. But yeah, we do have a competition. Closing date is the midday on November the 22nd, so in a week's time. But yeah, we'll put the link of that in the description. But let's crack on with today's offering. Before that, Doyle and Theo, you guys both all right after a weekend?
I had the weekend off, so yeah, it was great. I still haven't got over Friday's podcast though. No, still not got over.
Well, we're here to make amends today. Theo, yourself?
Yeah, I was working the whole international break weekend, so clearly it's hit me because I've not shaved or anything. You're lucky I'm dressed for this podcast, to be honest. But yeah, football is nearly back in a few days.
Yeah,
could have been in pajamas, couldn't I? I've actually got up. I've made a sort of effort.
Exactly. Right, okay. Let's crack on with the Q&A then. And first question in from Twitter from our friend Sam Williams. Gorsty, throw over this one to you straight away. It says, will the severity of Firmino's injury be the deciding factor on whether any attacker will arrive in January?
I did see this on Twitter before when Sam included us all in the tweet. So thanks for that, Sam. I don't think so, no, even being honest. I mean, I think Klopp said in his most recent press conference that it was going to be a 4-week layoff for Roberto Firmino, and he's a quick healer. And by the time the Arsenal game rolls around, that'll be over 2 weeks of that 4 weeks. And it's quite interesting because Liverpool and Klopp in particular are normally so guarded about injury layoffs and times and dates and whatever else. You know, you look at Thiago Alcantara last season, no one really knew what was up with him, and before you knew it, he'd been out for 3 months, and it was all very vague and shrouded in mystery, and no one quite knew what the problem was. But the fact that they've given a very clear, 4 weeks is going to be the amount of time that he's going to be off for, but makes me think that they're not going to be rushing into transfer plans based on that injury alone. There are other factors that might influence the thinking there, with Mane and Salah being at the AFCON and whatever else. But I don't think this particular injury means that they're going to be, desperate to bring someone in as it stands. But I do think there certainly will be assessing options for January, because it's unclear as to how long Salah and Mane are going to be away for, aren't we, at the moment? And they're Liverpool's two biggest goal scorers, aren't they? So I think they will be looking at something, but I don't think Firmino's injury is going to play too much of a part in that thinking.
No, definitely. Doyle, what about yourself? Because January, the last couple of years, Liverpool have actually ended up doing business. Of course, last year it was Ben Davies and Ozan Kabak who came in. The year before, Takumi Minamino. Can you see business being done in January for Liverpool?
Certainly, certainly not based on Firmino injury. Can I see something? The only way I could see something possibly is if they've got something lined up for next season and they want to bring it forward and they play a bit of an extra premium. It's probably the only thing. And having said that, they did, the Minamino one was interesting. It wasn't that much money, and was it £7.25 million? And I think that if someone of that similar kind of ilk is available, he may take a risk on it. But the point is, it's like you've seen with Minamino, it's taken him a while to settle. By the time the players are settling, all the Salah and Mane and whoever will be back. So that does seem a little bit pointless in that sense. So I will be surprised if they did buy anybody in January on the basis of that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Right, next question we go to then, and this comes from YouTube community. Jay Sawyer has got in touch. I hope I got the pronunciation right there. But Theo, I throw this one to you. How many signings do you think Liverpool need in the next summer window for a rebuild?
I suppose it depends who you've got leaving. You'd say at the moment that they need another forward, they need another central midfielder. But then the issue is that you need players to go to create space for this. Like Liverpool have got plenty of bodies in their squad, but it's whether you think Minamino's up for it, whether you think Origi's up for it, whether you think Naby Keita can stay fit, whether Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain can prove himself again. Those are the players that they kind of need to move on. And the issue there is when the contracts are running out in 2 years' time, they're not really going to get much money in for them, and whether they have the funds to invest again. We know the front three, they're all reaching that 30 mark now, and while at the moment you'd say Salah can carry on this form until he's 35 or something like that. It's the next stage of this Liverpool team on what they go and do with it. There are definitely 2 or 3 holes in the team that could be filled, and it's that next generation. But then at the same time, we've seen Harvey Elliott emerge, like he's been out running today. I think maybe he could be reasonably close to return in the next month or two. Well, that's an option in the front three. That's an option in the midfield there. Just depends what's the best way forward for Liverpool. Firmino was in the goals before his injury. Sadio Mane, while he's not been at his very best this season, he's still in the goals as well. They're still offering things. It's just they've got to find room in the squad because they're still on, what was it, 25 they managed to name, or 24 in the Premier League squad, and that was with Lloris Karius in. But they've got to get rid of players before they can bring anyone in. It's all very well saying you'd love to see him sign a big name striker, or this new Gini Wijnaldum replacement. But as long as they've got the players on the books, there isn't really the room to do such deals. But we know the weak points in the Liverpool team. And it's just a good thing that even with all the injuries, they've still got a very strong starting 11 with 3 or 4 players underneath that can come in when needed.
So what are you saying, 2 or 3?
2 or 3, yeah. But it does depend who leaves.
Yeah, cool. Any upgrade on that from yourself, Gorst, in terms of how many players Liverpool might need? I mean, for example, Nico Williams scored, didn't he, for Wales over the course of the weekend, and Rob Page said in that we need to get him playing. So if he were to move on, there was interest last summer. You'd even maybe be looking at another right back to come in, or someone who could play within that position.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one for Liverpool in terms of the fullbacks. I think Kostas Tsimikas is perfect for what he is, isn't he? He's someone who can come in and cover Robertson to a very good standard, and there are even people who are calling for Tsimikas to be starting games now ahead of Robertson. But on the right side, it's finding that fullback, isn't it, who's happy to play reserve to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and there are not many elite players who are happy to do that. So Nico Williams seems to be a player who does fit that mould, but with his international manager saying he needs to leave, and Liverpool would be more than willing to listen to offers for Nico Williams, I'm certain of that. It's just a case of whether he feels that it's time to move on. He hasn't played a whole lot this season, has he? But that's his call, essentially. And yeah, I think I agree with Theo. I mean, I don't think the guys put the question suggested a rebuild, but I don't think Liverpool need a rebuild. I think it's just tweaks, isn't it, every season? And before with 3 years in, you rebuild because that's the model that you've been working towards. So I certainly think they need another attacker. I did so before the window closed. Wasn't as sold on the need for a midfielder, but wouldn't hurt. But again, as Theo mentions, it's the numbers that they've got, isn't it? And the fact that Klopp prefers a trimmer squad, and the fact that the wage bill is already very high. So I don't think they're going to be making 6 or 7 in the summer anyway. And I think a couple might be coming in, but I certainly wouldn't be thinking it'd be wholesale changes to the squad this summer or next summer.
Yeah, no, and you probably consider James Milner. His contract's coming to an end, isn't it? So he's likely to maybe hang up his boots. So that would maybe be another midfielder. But anyway, let's wait and see how that plays out. Back to Twitter we go, and Cop DXBG says, will be interesting to hear how you guys feel we'll set up tactically when we lose Mane, Salah and Naby for the AFCON. Also thoughts on links to Adeyemi and Tuchemeni, I think he's called, the AS Monaco midfielder, seem more realistic than Rafinha and Bellingham? Doyle, that one's for you. So two-parter, the tactical setup during AFCON. How will Liverpool cope without those players when they're not here? Where will Liverpool be without Mohamed Salah? And then also the transfers, Adeyemi, and the player from the midfielder from Monaco.
Well, the transfers, we just dealt with that. With the other part, they'll play 4-3-3. I thought there's no reason for them to change it. Everybody trains for 4-3-3, possibly 4-2-3-1. Can't see them doing anything different. Certainly won't go to 4-2-4 like they did for a little bit last season for a couple of games because they won't be there basically. So I can't see there being any difference to that 4-2. But possibly, I don't know. Depends on who they're playing. There was a couple of games last season where they went to a diamond in midfield, went to 4-4-2. So again, it's the same names, isn't it? The actual tactical tweaks are very, very. It's not as if they're going to go to a 3-man defence or anything like that, even though they probably could do that because they've got so many centre backs available at the moment, which is completely different to what we had last year. So I can't see that. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say on that then, we've kind of got another question that came in on YouTube regarding Minamino and Divock Origi. Is it a chance now that Klopp should start getting them some minutes so they are ready to kind of hit the ground running? They're not coming in cold. Kind of think immediately the 2 Champions League group games that might well offer an opportunity to kind of get them some minutes in game time before they're relied upon when the African guys are away.
Well, they've already done that, haven't they? They've been playing a couple more minutes. Origi came on and scored against West Ham. So, he's it's possibly Minamino needs a little bit more of a run out. But if you look at the numbers for the pair of them, they've scored. Given the amount of time they've been on the pitch, they've contributed quite a lot in terms of goals and assists. But obviously, that has to be set against the fact that they were playing against for most of the time. But you're right, the Champions League games are the ones where they're going to have a chance. But it isn't even just that. I mean, they're playing so many games now. They've got at least between now and the end of the year 3 midweek Premier League games. So they're going to get chances there as well as that League Cup game against Leicester. So there will be opportunities for these players. And I think it's weird, isn't it? Because if they do all right, this whole talk of they need to sign somebody in January probably might dissipate a little bit when they realise how many games the likes of Salah and Mane are going to be missing for. But then if it doesn't go so well, then you do imagine that there'll be people hiding behind the sofas when Mane and Salah go off. Of course, the irony is, Keita could at the moment be the bigger miss because they haven't got any midfielders at the moment. So we don't know what it's going to be like by the time it comes to January when they all head off to Cameroon. It's Cameroon, isn't it? Cameroon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we rehearse this because now we're going to move on to injuries and talking about squad setup. So, WND on Twitter, Theo, says, regarding injuries being a major factor for us for the last couple of seasons, is it more to do with then just bad luck? Numerous occasions, players taking months to come back when originally it's only meant to be a matter of weeks. Is it bad coaching, training to blame, or is it just the way that Liverpool play?
Oh, yeah, it's awful coaching.
Right,
awful coaching. They've won Premier League, Champions League, but they don't know what they're doing. Got it all wrong.
Finally found out who Raymond the Egg is. It's actually Theo Squires.
Yeah, definitely. You would say last season, definitely, it was bad luck to lose Virgil van Dijk and Joe Gomez the way they did with serious knee injuries and these setbacks as well. But it's also not helped with the fact that there was the pandemic and they were playing catch up to finish the season before. They didn't have a pre-season. And every season, every summer, we hear Jurgen Klopp complaining about how much football these players have to play. And that's just taking its toll. Like when you've not had a proper pre-season, the injuries will pick up and you're playing games week in, week out. And yes, there was a long pre-season this year and they have had those injuries in midfield. Roberto Firmino's had a couple of hamstring injuries. But it's just the way Liverpool play as well, I suppose. Like that is the strain you put on players. You think, well, Firmino, when he was first choice playing week in, week out, rarely got injured at all. Now, maybe when he's more of this, he'll come in to the starting 11 one week, he'll be on the bench, come off fit another. He's not got that rhythm there. But yeah, players get injuries. It's what happens. You look at any squad in the Premier League, they've had players that have suffered from injuries, and it just so happens that in 2 years running, all of Liverpool's seem to have come in one position. Centre-back last year, midfield this year. Like you'd say Harvey Elliott, that injury was a fluke as well. You get the odd knocks, like we've seen Fabinho, Thiago, Naby Keita, Jordan Henderson have all got the odd setback here and there, but that's part and parcel of it. At least they're coming back from injury now. That is the one blessing. Like it's been a setback for Liverpool in the international break that we've seen Mane get a blow to the ribs, was it? We've seen Jordan Henderson pick up an injury, but we know, well, Fabinho was back before the international break. Thiago was back before the international break, and James Milner and Naby Keita might not be too far off a return. So they've not been left too short yet. But yeah, it's just what happens. Players, when they're going and playing these many games and it's this style of play where it's so demanding and they're not able to train as much because it is so intense, injuries happen.
Definitely right. Okay, Paul Brady on Twitter, Gorsty says he finds it odd that Steven Gerrard signed a 3.5-year contract when he knows that Klopp still runs out in 2.5 years. Whilst Gerrard won't assume that he's nailed on to get the job, if Liverpool come calling, he won't hesitate in taking it. So knowing that Liverpool would have to compensate with Villa, why do you think he would have signed for an extra year? And I suppose it's just kind of chance to ask you wider on your thoughts of Steven Gerrard taking that job and moving into the Premier League.
I think, was it Paul who said, I think he's answered his own question there, hasn't he, by saying Gerrard won't assume that he's nailed on for the job. I don't think the Anfield hot seat will have been any part of Steven Gerrard's thinking when he said yes to Aston Villa. Obviously, that is what his ultimate aim will be, and I think he might have even said that to me, actually, when I interviewed him a couple of years back now, when he was kind of just getting his feet wet with Rangers, but he's taken that Aston Villa job on its own merit. Villa are a massive club who, possibly someone like Doyle, you'd suggest they'd be underachieving because of what they've done for years. I mean, I always remember them being certainly a Premier League club, a staple of the Premier League, and then they had a couple of years out of it, didn't they? But it's the biggest club in the Midlands. It's top 8, top 10 club in England. It's a massive club that probably at the moment doesn't have too many wild expectations. People aren't going to be expecting them to come in and finish 4th or even 6th. So he's got something of a blank canvas to build with his team. Mick Beale's gone there with him and Gary McAllister. So he knows how they work, and it seems to have been very successful at Rangers. So I think Steven Gerrard will just be thinking solely on performing the best he can as Aston Villa manager. And years down the line, if there's an opportunity, or when there's an opportunity, or if he's proven that he's good enough as a manager to become a Liverpool manager, then maybe. But for now, I just think he'll be thinking of the Aston Villa job, and I think it's a very sensible step for him. I think ideally he might have preferred to have taken it in the summer rather than leaving Rangers mid-season, because some fans seem to have taken that badly. But you can't really, you've got to strike while the iron's hot, I guess, and looking forward to seeing what he's going to do in the Premier League.
Can I just jump in and say, why does it matter about compensation? Managers don't cost that much if you want to buy them out of a contract. It's not as though Liverpool are short of cash. Like, granted, they might be able to not be able to afford 100 million on a Kylian Mbappe or an Erling Haaland, but Steven Gerrard, it's only going to be what, if you want to buy him out of his contract, a few million in comparison. Whenever the time comes, if he's in contract, it's not going to make any difference. Just because we're waiting for Jurgen Klopp to leave at the end of his contract, managers don't tend to just go at end of contracts, do they? They're either free agents because they've been sacked, because that's the nature of the game, or you pay compensation. And that's exactly what Villa have just done to get Gerrard in the first place. It doesn't matter what his length of the contract is. When Liverpool come calling, he could be out of work, or he could have 2-3 years left. They will try and get it done, and they will stump up the cash if he's the man they want.
I wonder as well, if you take the name Steven Gerrard out the equation, I wonder how well he has to do as a manager of Aston Villa to be in the frame for the Liverpool job. And I can't even think of what the measurements of success would be. Would it be getting Villa into the top 4? Because I think if, for example, he wins the Premier League, he wins an FA Cup.
Getting ambitious there, Gorsty.
Big achievement. But
no, but that's the thing. We had the debate on the Ale LaRouche podcast over the weekend. What's better, actually, him win 6 or 7 games to win the FA Cup, or he get into even the Europa League over a course of a 38 league game campaign? The style of play, this, that, and the other, it is very, very intriguing to see. Before we get on with the second half of the pod, Paul did also get in touch directly. A couple of questions for each one for Theo and Doyle. Theo, why do you always call Jota Yotta? And Doyle, why have you retired the cornflake mug?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Because this one is newer, and that's it. It's not retired. I still use it. It's just not on pod. Also, it's very bright here now for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Right. Okay. Is it going to make a return to the pods now it's been asked for? Nope.
No.
Cool. Right, that's been retired then. Theo, what about yourself, Jota and Jota? What's going on?
I believe he's tweeted me, or someone's tweeted me about this before, and it's purely just to wind him up. It's the only reason. Deliberately say it wrong because I know it winds people up.
Right, like we call you the O, which was
Exactly.
actually how Paul asked the question. Why does the O always call Jota Jota? Anyway, let's get on with the second half of the pod with even more questions coming in. Heading back now into the Blood Red Podcast Facebook group. Nasser asks, can you guys offer an insight into playing Robertson and Tsimikas together whenever Trent Alexander-Arnold is unavailable? Gorsty, I'll throw that one to you. We kind of see it with Scotland every so often. They seem to have settled on a back five now. But before that, Robertson and Tierney, both left backs, were kind of put into the same team, quite often one of them playing on the right-hand side. Can you see Liverpool doing it if Trent were to pick up an injury?
No, I can't, to be honest. I think they're both specialist left backs, aren't they? It's I think some people sometimes think that if you're a fullback, you can play either or, and some people can do it very well. You know, João Cancelo, probably the best at that in the Premier League, isn't he? But I think Tsimikas and Robertson are very much left backs, and I couldn't really see them performing a similar type of job on the right. I think just the balance would be off, and I don't think either of them are particularly strong on the right side, are they? So, no, I imagine if Trent's unavailable, then it's going to be Milner or Nico Williams.
Okay, yeah. Nasser has another question as well. Give this one to you, Doyley. What's the answer to the overloading at the back post? Teams seem to have found success against Liverpool in the last few months. Brentford, West Ham and Brighton. Are the players expecting Virgil van Dijk to deal with everything? Or what do you think the answer is for Liverpool defensively kind of coming unstuck? You've been at a number of these games and kind of seen the difficulties they've had with the set pieces.
Depends, doesn't it? If it's at the set pieces, just move people around. If it's during open play like Brentford's were, then you're looking at asking the right-sided midfielder to drop back a bit. There's always different ways of doing it. You could, as you said, you could ask whoever the right-sided defender is, because it's not Van Dijk, because he's on the left-hand side, normally Matip. You ask him to go a bit further across, but then you're asking, then the problem then is that they could go straight through the middle. And then you're asking the defensive midfielder to then drop back a little bit, whether that's Fabinho or whoever. So there's more than one way of solving that one. I'm pretty sure Liverpool's coaching staff know a little bit more about it than I do in terms of solving tactical conundrums, given the fact that, as Theo said before, they've won quite a few trophies in the past. So I don't think it's a massive problem, but it's one that, well, to be fair, certainly in open play, what Liverpool would say is don't let them cross it. That's what they'd always say. So they'd be looking to stop the crosses coming in, and they were very good at doing that a couple of years ago. And that's something that they've been somewhat less good at doing this time around. And part of that could be, I don't know, maybe the forwards aren't tracking back as much. Maybe they've not been asked to track back as much, is why they've scored so many goals as compared to other seasons. Maybe it's the fact that Wijnaldum's not there to, he always drops back, and they need somebody else to do it. Don't know. It's just one of those. What hasn't helped, as with most of the things this season, is the lack of consistency in midfield. If you've lost your most consistent midfielder in terms of presence in Wijnaldum, one thing you do want then is to have certainly two of the players to be playing most of the games. Then Liverpool have struggled to get one to play most of the games in midfield this season, so that'll be the issue they'll be looking at.
We've got another question then regarding defence, and Theo, I'll throw this one your way. Dakish says, do you think Virgil van Dijk has no longer been near the Virgil that we know? Have you any concerns over Van Dijk? Obviously, it was a very serious injury he had and was maybe going to take a bit of time to get to full speed. Or do you actually think maybe the microscope's been on him when really it could do to be elsewhere on the team?
I think it's just what you expect when you come back from a serious injury. I think he did an interview with the programme where he said he doesn't know when he'll be back to his best. But it does take time. These players are serial winners, and he'll be his own biggest critic now, watching how he's playing and watching it back and wanting to get back to those levels for 2 years ago. But it takes time, and it's not as though he's got this staple of the defence alongside him who's injury-free himself. Like they've brought in Konate, who's a new signing. He's got to find his feet as well. Joel Matip's having a good season so far, but he's coming back from a serious injury as well. And before that, it had been Joe Gomez, who was his first choice partner, and Gomez is feeling his way back too. It probably would have been easier for him if one of the two, Matip or Gomez, had been available all of last season and had their own rhythm, so then he could just slot in alongside them. but he's got to go straight back in and be the leader of the defence again. The way Liverpool season turned out last season, there is more of that impact on him. Like you're thinking, oh, he can turn it around. He can be the saviour again, take them from being a top 4 side to challenging for the Premier League title, challenging for the Champions League. It will take time. Yeah, he's not at his very best, but neither is any of the Liverpool back 4 really. Like Alisson, apart from the West Ham game, he's had a very good season, made a number of top saves. Trent's been great going forward, but there's still been leaking defensives we've just touched on, and it's all contributing there. But then it's the stability in midfield as well. Like Fabinho's not been the number 6 in every game. They just need to get a few players back from injury, get them a run of games, and then it will all come together on the pitch. We saw what happened when that happened during the second half of last season, when they went on that incredible run during the last couple of months, when they put players back in the preferred positions and just let them play through it. No long-term worries about Van Dijk. It will come from playing, but he's not exactly been bad, has he, so far this season? He might not be up there with his Ballon d'Or contention winning form, but he's still one of the very best defenders around.
I sometimes think as well that people think that Liverpool operate in this vacuum where they're only responsible for what happens on the pitch. The 2 teams who are trying to win the game, aren't they, every time Liverpool play? And more often than not, Liverpool do get the better of it. But sometimes the other team play quite well as well. We've seen that certainly when Liverpool went to Brentford the other week. West Ham were better than Liverpool on the day. That was as poor as Liverpool have played since March when they were on that dreadful run of 6 home defeats in a row. West Ham bullied Liverpool, to be honest, and that's something you don't really say of Liverpool anymore. But if we look at all the goals, one was a counter, the other 2 were just, they were stronger than them, weren't they, with the set pieces. And sometimes you have to hold your hands up and say that Liverpool were on the day or the other team were better. And I don't think that means that there's any great underlying crisis for anything, really. Obviously, Van Dijk's going to take a little bit of time to get back to that level, but I still think he's been generally excellent this season, and he will be for most of it to come.
Right, so on that then, and on kind of what we touched on with Doyle before, Gorsey, this one's for you. Jesse Farmer in the Blood Red Podcast Facebook group says, has our style become a little too structured and predictable? Teams obviously do their homework and seem to be getting better at defending cross after cross from wide areas. Do we rely on this a little too often at times? When we get fatigued or lack intensity, this way of playing seems to be quite slow and lethargic and easy to defend, like against West Ham. So sometimes do we need a plan B, for example, being more direct, e.g. Mane's goal v City, Origi v Everton, etc.?
Trying to think, Mane's goal v City. Well, I think Liverpool are very direct anyway. I think out of all the top teams, they're probably the most direct in the way they move it front to back as quickly as possible, but the long balls from the back from Matip and or Van Dijk. So I don't think that's an issue of them being a bit too intricate and overly, playing too much at times. I don't know really. I wonder what the tone would be if Liverpool wouldn't have just had that result against West Ham. I think generally the season has been too bad, has it? You look at the Chelsea results playing against 10 men. That was a bit disappointing, but Chelsea were superb on the day defensively. Thomas Tuchel didn't really change the system with the man less. He just basically kept it as it was, and they just kept Lukaku up on his own. Man City could have went either way, couldn't they? Man City was superb in that first half. Liverpool showed the character and the brilliance of Salah in that one, but against West Ham, they just weren't at it really. Sometimes that happens, and sometimes you have to accept it. I don't really think there's a need to delve too deep into the reasons why and try and rip up the blueprints and come up with different ideas, because we've seen 2 or 3 days before the West Ham game against Atletico Madrid, the champion of Spain, Liverpool absolutely battered them and should have been a lot more than 2-0. So sometimes I think whatever's happened in the last game or the last 15 minutes of football tends to cloud some people's opinions a bit.
Yeah, it's just the West Ham game, isn't it, with the crosses? Like, you think Robertson's delivery in that was poor. He wasn't picking out his men. And they had Trent more inverted with Henderson going out wide, and it didn't quite work. But if we'd been doing this podcast before the West Ham game, we'd have been talking about how good Trent's delivery was against Atletico, where he got 2 amazing assists. Granted, one of them was a shot, but it worked out as a brilliant cross. And you go back through games before that, Manchester United, how many of those goals came from crosses in the first half from the right-hand side? Watford, there was a couple there where they've got the crosses in. Even Porto, Brentford, like Jota's header. Jota there. I said it right for him. Jota. But
that was for you, Paul.
Yeah, they are getting plenty of goals from crosses. Trent Alexander-Arnold is getting plenty of assists. Andy Robertson's delivery has been lacking. And that did cost them a lot against West Ham because he didn't have his best game and they were going down the left-hand side a lot. But for the majority of the season, as Gorsty's touched on there, they are getting success from the crosses. It's not teams working out how to defend against them. It's more them not being on top of it themselves. When they're on form, then you can't defend against their crosses. That's when you've got Trent on form. His balls are impossible to stop. That was a bit of a risky sentence, but I think I got away with it.
I did wonder where that was going.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Final question of the podcast. Doyle, you started by saying you weren't over Friday's episode. One Kai Delaney says, what's the latest rumours on that Guy Clarke's lost the dressing room after last week's performance? What's the verdict?
That would assume that he had the dressing room in the first place. So that is a massive claim. So I do believe that. I think if Guy Clarke is going to stick around for the remainder of the week, Friday's podcast should be interesting because obviously Liverpool's next game is against Arsenal, which is a team that Guy Clarke of down south is a major supporter. So I think it could be a chance for him he could have a chance to maybe reclaim that spot in the seat because it's looking a bit dodgy for him at the moment.
Yeah, well, they are the big questions answered here on this edition of the Blood Red podcast. Of course, we will be back with you on Friday. Plenty of content to come through the course of the week, whether that's across on the Liverpool Echo website, our podcast offerings, or across on the YouTube channel. Do check out all of those places for the latest, including on Harvey Elliott being back on the grass for Liverpool. Hopefully it won't be too long before he is back playing for the Reds. But for myself, Guy Clarke, Theo Squires, Ian Doyle and Paul Gorst, who of course you can get to see live in action in Dublin in just 9 days' time. Do check out the link in the description. Thanks for your time and your company. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.